is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliette Mann. Our top stories. Pressure grows on the European Central Bank as Eurozone inflation hits a record high.
Our other headlines, global markets are rattled after Moderna predicts vaccines will be less effective against this new Omicron COVID variant.
Easyjet reports a $1.5 billion loss, with airline bosses warning of more turbulence in the months ahead.
And why Guangdong province is at the centre of a boom in China's trade with African countries.
Inflation in the Eurozone is at its highest point since the launch of the European single currency 2 decades ago.
The headline borrowing cost has risen to 4.9% across the 19 member states. Much of that increase has come from energy prices, which are up 27% on this time last year as the zone's biggest economies emerge from lockdowns. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin. Trent, these figures are going to come as pretty grim reading for the European Central Bank. Was this rise expected?
Well, analysts had expected for there to be a rise, but only around 4.5%. That was the widely held consensus. At 4.9%, well, that shows that pricing pressures really are growing much faster than expected, especially for cost of living and European households. And it's for that reason now that all eyes really are on the European Central Bank to see how they will respond. As you said, energy prices really driving the increase. Also, supply chain issues starting to bite as well. The ECB will meet next month where they will obviously discuss these latest inflation figures, but also very likely we will see a revision of economic growth forecasts across the Eurozone. The big question also now is whether those big spending programs enacted by the ECB on things like bond purchases and pandemic support packages will need to be extended given the real difficult situation the European economy seems to find itself in, how it's very fragile. I think Christine Lagarde is open to that idea. She has certainly signalled that that program may need to be extended. I think today's inflation data may just add weight to that argument.
And of course, this was before the new COVID variant was discovered. I wonder what impact is that having?
Yeah, well, I think both financial and policymakers in the political space as well will be watching the emergence of this variant very closely. Of course, Europe has been really left quite rattled by all of this. As I speak to you, lawmakers here in Berlin are meeting to discuss whether further restrictions might be needed. Angela Merkel and the country's 16 state premiers discussing that now. But of course, there has been resistance to restrictions already being introduced in parts of Europe because of the resurgence of the Delta variant. We know there's been protests in places like the Netherlands and Austria at the reintroduction of further lockdown restrictions. So it is a difficult balancing act for lawmakers across Europe. And as you say, that was before the arrival of this new variant. So it does put quite a lot on the agenda, not just for the ECB, but for various capitals across Europe.
Trent, thanks for that. Trent Murray, our correspondent in Berlin.
Well, breaking down the numbers, the Eurozone's second biggest economy has seen inflation rise at its fastest rate in more than a decade. France says the cost of living is up 3.4%. That's the biggest year-on-year increase since 2008. Christopher Dembick is head of macro analysis at Saxo Bank, and I asked him what we should make of these figures.
Well, I think this is quite clear that inflation will remain in place for much longer than most of the policymakers and central bankers expect. I mean, if we look at the latest data of inflation for November in the Eurozone, or especially in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal, all of them are increasing quite a lot. And we see that this is not transitory, or at least we call it transitory for longer. We see we have a bunch of data that explain us, that let us believe that inflation will be still a key issue going into next year. We have bottlenecks, we have energy crisis, we start to see workers asking for higher salaries in some countries, and even in countries where you have high unemployment. So I think, as a matter of fact, we need to understand very well that inflation will not disappear from one day to another. And when the European Central Bank is telling us that inflation will start to decrease from early next year, I think they are overly optimistic, and my belief is that inflation will keep increasing, especially due to bottlenecks, due to the pandemic, but also due to the fact that the European Union is facing kind of a harsh energy crisis currently, and it won't disappear in January or February. It might be worse, actually.
Oh, my goodness, that's such a gloomy outlook for what's to come. Look, exploding energy prices, euro area inflation soaring. What's the picture like in France?
Well, the situation in France is, I would say, under control. Inflation comparatively is less high than in most of the Eurozone countries. We see also that unemployment trend is getting down, so this is quite positive because we all know that usually in France, higher unemployment was one of the key issues. And of course, I would say this is more or less the same situation in most of the European countries. We have seen that GDP activity was mostly driven by consumption. As a matter of fact, if I look only at economic situation, I would say that France has never been in such a good shape over the past, 5 or 7 years. The last time that France was such in a good shape was probably actually even before the global financial crisis.
So you're saying that France is in pretty good shape in terms of the economy. The issue perhaps then is the mood. I mean, what impact might the new variant have on consumer confidence?
Well, it will, of course, depend on the evolution of the pandemic. The positive factor in France is that the vaccination rate is quite high. But on top of that, we see that all the measures that has been taken by the government since March 2020 managed to at least save the purchasing power of most of the households. And for some of them, even purchasing power has increased.
Well, let's talk about the balance of economic power in the EU. And with the new France-Italy deal, a new German chancellor, key general elections in 2022, what is changing in terms of economic growth?
Germany is facing plenty of structural challenges. And as a matter of fact, we will have, of course, the French election going into 2022. My bet is that Emmanuel Macron will be re-elected, and he might count on the Italian Prime Minister Draghi in this prospect. I think that Macron could also try, of course, to work with Germany, but also work much closer with other European countries, especially Italy, in order to move forward in terms of European economic integration.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, flying the flag, Italy's branding campaign to sell more of its goods around the world.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. A quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And here in the UK on Preview.
Now, the boss of the United States pharmaceutical company Moderna says current coronavirus vaccines may be less effective against this new Omicron variant. So just how worried should we be? Let's talk to Dr. Mohammed Monir, virologist at Lancaster University. Doctor, welcome back. Good to see you again. How much of a setback is Omicron for our existing vaccines?
Well, if it is proven to be right that the vaccines are less effective against Omicron, that is going to be a big blow for already derailed vaccine system in developing countries. That means that the vaccine need to be retweaked and it need to be retested. That is around 3 to 4 months process. And that means that the current vaccine would be less acceptable and there would be increased vaccine hesitancy. So let's hope that there will be little or no reduction in the vaccine efficacy. But given the amount and the magnitude of those mutations at a very critical site within the spike protein, it is likely that the vaccine wouldn't be fully effective as it has been even against Delta.
Now, you are the perfect guest to be talking to today because I know you've been working on developing, I think, a nasal vaccine. I wonder how will the arrival of Omicron impact your research? Do you have to tear everything up and start again? How does it work?
Yes, absolutely. That is a big challenge in the vaccine development, is that once the vaccine reach to a point of GMP, it's called good manufacturing practice, is a purified material that goes for the clinical trial. It's almost irreversible because you can only go forward. You can't go back because otherwise you got to restart the process. And that is where majority of the time it takes the time to develop that part. But our intranasal approach is really to tackle for these problems because we know that this virus entered through the nose and mouth. So if we can protect that area, basically we are nipping the virus at the bud, and that is the way we're going to reduce the transmission and increase the mucosal immunity. And I've always been given an example. That is the reason that our port of entries are always stronger in terms of security, so that the illegal entry of any person would be blocked. That is the same way of nasal administration, because if we do so, the virus entry can be significantly reduced, and that will affect onto the transmission, and that is ultimately we have to achieve.
Now, I know we are on the very early days of new cases, yes, so I appreciate this is a difficult question, but how long until we confirm the efficacy of these existing vaccines against Omicron?
Yesterday evening, we had our WHO expert panel meeting onto the COVID-19 vaccine, and we have discussed very thoroughly what we need to do to answer the pressing question. And in the scientific community, the most important question is exactly the same as you asked, whether the vaccines are effective or not. To test the vaccine efficacy against this new variant, we have to isolate this virus in the laboratory so that we can test that one against the vaccine. At the moment, it's only 1 or 2 laboratories that are having it. So in next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be, majority of the laboratory workers would have this access to the virus. That is the time when we will have answer to really definitively telling that this variant is going to escape the immunity, or to what level it would escape the immunity. And afterward, it would be questioned about the transmission and its reinfection potential.
For people watching around the world who may have had 1 dose or 2 doses, or perhaps even all 3, the booster jab as well, what is the answer to the question, just how worried should we be about this new variant?
Well, I usually give an example. A bird in hand is better than 13 in bushes. While we are working on to answer those questions and identify if the vaccine is effective or not, what we have in hand is the booster jab, current vaccines. Even if these vaccines would be less effective, they cannot be completely knocked out, because all variants that have been identified so far, none of the variants have completely managed to unroot the effect of the vaccine. So there will always be some level of protection. Therefore, it is critical that carry on doing the vaccination, because higher the level of antibodies in the body, even if some of the antibodies are not very effective against this new variant, still because of the high level, it would give quite good protection from hospitalization and death. So my message would be that if you are offered and if you are eligible for the booster jab, please do take so.
Dr. Munir, good luck with your work, and thanks very much once again for talking to us on the programme. That's Dr. Mohammed Munir, the virologist at Lancaster University.
Europe is racing to contain infections caused by the latest mutation of the virus, with many countries bringing back restrictions. In the UK, mask wearing has become compulsory again, just as the government scales up its booster campaign. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Naweed Jabarkal. Naweed, good to see you. I know Boris Johnson has been giving a briefing at Downing Street. What's he said so far?
Yeah, quite a lot to come out of this. Let's start with some of the latest news around that Omicron. Another 8 cases of the variant confirmed here in England. That takes the UK's total up to 22 cases. Aside from that, MPs, lawmakers in the House of Commons have approved Boris Johnson's plans to bring in these tighter legal restrictions, 434 of them approving those plans, and just over 20 saying it was a bad idea. And that's quite significant if you think that a lot of the pushback has come from his own party, the Conservatives. Much of the opposition wants to go even further in terms of the restrictions being brought in. Today, for the first time in several months, masks are back. People will have to wear them in certain places. Aside from that, international travel is another area that's also been affected. But really, this message, Boris Johnson joined by the Health Secretary Sajid Javid, as well as the head of NHS England, that's the Public Health Service, to really push through that message of boosters and vaccinations. We heard from Dr. Munir there that a bird in hand is better than many in the sky, and that's the thinking of a lot of officials at the moment, that if they try and get antibodies up, if they can get more people vaccinated, whether or not or to what degree they're effective, that's still unclear. But the idea is to rush out those boosters as quickly as they can. In total, 18 million people, we've just heard, have now received a booster jab, most of those over the age of 40. Now, all adults in the UK will be given one, so that's going to mean millions, tens of millions more people requiring a booster jab in the coming weeks, and there are some concerns about whether there's enough availability of those, but the UK pretty well stocked. In terms of what people make all of this, we've been out and about here in London, Oxford Street, one of the busiest shopping centres, shopping districts in the world, and so far it seems that some people are listening to the rules. For the first time since July in England, people have to wear face masks. The new rules only apply in shops and on public transport, and they're a response to the new Omicron variant of COVID-19 that's already circulating in the UK.
It's unknown, so we need to buy some time so our scientists can work with the world's leading scientists to just basically sort of figure out what... we know it's very transmissible by looking at but we don't know, whether it will work with the vaccine will work, all the other treatments, etc.
As the cold winter gets nearer, masks could be a vital tool in preventing the virus from spreading. Public health experts here mostly agree on how effective they are, even if there are serious doubts about how strictly the rules will be enforced.
I think it's just a wise precaution at the moment. Well, we don't know what's going on with the new variant,
Just need to look after ourselves, do as we're told, and get on with it now.
I think it's really important to try and keep the infection rates low and down.
Yeah, no one wants to go back to being stuck indoors alone, locked down. Pubs shut, restaurants shut, football grounds empty. I'll wear a mask.
New international travel rules have also come into effect in the UK that officials hope will keep out cases of Omicron. All arrivals will have to self-isolate and take a PCR test before the end of day 2. Only those with a negative result can leave quarantine. Some in the travel industry have criticised the move as excessive and costly. All of the legal changes introduced on Tuesday will be reviewed in 3 weeks. This does feel like a bit of a watershed moment in the UK's fight against COVID-19. The return of some would say strict rules months after most legal restrictions here in England were scrapped entirely. The government says that these measures, they're necessary, that they're the right balance to strike, especially as they expect Omicron cases to rise in the coming weeks and possibly the coming months as well. But already we're seeing some pushback, not just from people, but businesses as well, who will be impacted and say that the cost of all this may be too much.
Well, Louise, of course, Prime Minister saying that vaccination centres are going to be popping up like Christmas trees. That's one way to tackle things. On the other hand, going back to those restrictions, you mentioned this review in 3 to 4 weeks' time. But what if the UK has to go the same way as some other countries on the continent? Lockdown. We've seen what's happened in the Netherlands with riots. Politically, is that something that the UK public could stomach?
Yeah, and I think the messaging from Downing Street, at least, and from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, seems to be one of caution and one of trying not to jump in head first, like they did last Christmas in promising people a normal Christmas and then having to change the rules very late on, which meant that lots of people weren't able to share it with large parts of their family. But the language that we're hearing from officials now, the Health Secretary Sajid Javid a short while ago saying there's a lot we don't know about this virus, but they're working day and night, he says, to try and work with scientists, not just here in the UK, but around the world, to discover what's necessary to try and push back against the new variant. We also heard in that report the UK's Minister of State for Health also saying that it's relatively unknown. So essentially that's trying to buy themselves some space politically, that if things don't go wrong, there will be some room for manoeuvre. But really, as I mentioned, the opposition Labour Party want things to go even further. We've heard from the Scottish and Welsh ministers saying that a day 2 PCR test isn't enough for international travel. We want a day 8 test and for people to self-isolate for up to 8 days. And once again, as you see, there are divisions over the best way to deal with this. At the moment, that travel ban still in place as of Tuesday earlier this morning. All those countries moving on to the red list, so people returning back to the UK. Thousands of people currently stranded outside the country looking to get back in. But moving forward, I think the big thing to come now is that review after 3 weeks. Parliament is set to go on its winter recess. It's set to go for its Christmas break on the 16th of December. That's when it's set to rise. The next review isn't expected until the 22nd of December, so there will be some eyebrows within the Conservative Party about whether these measures may be moved on to Christmas. And that Christmas thing is a really important issue here. Boris Johnson, earlier today, one of the head of the Health Security Agency here in the UK, Dr. Jenny Harries, saying that people shouldn't mix with other households if they don't need to around Christmas. Boris Johnson coming out quickly after that to reporters saying, no, that's not what the government's advice is. Scientists can advise, but the government makes the decisions at the end of the day. So at the moment, it's these restrictions brought in after a long time, but according to the government, they're trying to do their best to let people live their lives as normal as possible.
Well, doing their best might not be good enough for the health and safety of the nation, but also for the economy. Luigi Barco for now from Oxford Circus, thank you.
Let's take you to the United States now, where lawmakers are grilling Federal Reserve and Treasury officials over the potential economic impact of the Omicron COVID variant and the current high level of inflation. Let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. John, two big names in the United States. What are Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, and Federal Reserve Chair Jay Powell saying?
Well, you know, Jamie and Julia, they do this twice a year, and it always makes very, very big news here in a way that I don't think it really does quite in the same way when the Chancellor appears before a select committee in Westminster. But it really makes huge headlines, and so it is just now. Now, the two of them are before the Senate Banking Committee right now, and you can see them now. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, in the US, they will appear before the House Financial Services Committee, and they will say exactly the same thing, but as a courtesy to both houses, they appear before both of them. Now, they are bringing with them a warning. What always happens on these events is there's always testimony is pre-published so the journalists can see it. And Jerome Powell, head of the central bank, is predicting growth in the next year of 5%. But listen to some of the other things that he's been saying. He said that the factors pushing inflation upwards will last well into next year. He said risky high inflation has increased. The risk of high inflation has increased. He said it's a good time to retire the word that we've been using for inflation, which is transitory. He said it's a good time to retire that word. He said the supply situation has not improved, and he's just said Omicron is not baked into the forecast. I'm sorry I stumbled through that a little bit, but my handwriting, I was writing it down as quickly as I possibly could. That's what he's just said. So as a result of that, the markets are now tumbling quite sharply. Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, says failure to deal with the debt limit will eviscerate the recovery. And that whole debt ceiling issue is something we don't have time to go into now, but it's an issue that is looming on December the 15th. I think the truth is we all just have to wait. But what's going to happen now is that the markets are going to react on a minute-by-minute basis. So when somebody says something positive about inflation or about Omicron, then the markets will go up as they did yesterday. When they say something negative, they will go down. And today's negative news, apart from what Chairman Powell just said, driving the markets lower, is the CEO of Pfizer, one of the big drug companies providing the vaccine, Albert Bourla. He's a Greek-American. He's been telling the Financial Times this morning, the old Pinkin, that the vaccines that we have are likely to struggle against this variant. And the CEO of Moderna, which is based in Cambridge in Massachusetts, says it'll be many months before they can tweak their vaccines to accommodate the Omicron variant. Well, I mean, I don't think that's as bad as it sounds, because I think we were always expecting them to take 2 or 3 months to do it, so we're probably looking like March of next year. Anyway, the markets are sharply down. The Dow is down 1.1%, 400 points. NASDAQ down pretty much the same amount, 187 points. S&P 500 is down by about 59 points at the moment. Remember, they were up yesterday because the news yesterday on Omicron was reasonable. Guys.
Funny old world. There's a big tech story we must talk about. Amazon in the spotlight, and Amazon workers joining trade unions in Alabama. The company won't take this well, will they? What more can you tell us about this?
Well, I always love the choice of stories you come up with on this program. This is a great story, and I'll tell you why. Because basically the Labor Relations Board in the United States, the National Labor Relations Board, is forcing Amazon to redo an election in one of their huge plants in which the staff wished to join a union, but which got defeated. Now, this is the Bessemer, Alabama plant. Now, down in Bessemer in Alabama, it's huge, what they call fulfillment center, which is where all the stuff that you buy online actually is, and then they package it up and they send it out to your home. That's what it is in Bessemer. Now, Amazon say, look, you know, we pay the best wages for 100 miles. You've all got great benefits. You know, we're paying for your education in some cases. Why do you want to join a union? And they say, well, actually, the reason is you only give us 5 minutes to go to the toilet, and the plant is so big, it takes us 35 minutes to get there and back. That's one reason. That's one reason, but that was cited. Anyway, at the end of the day, 1,700 people voted against and 700 in favour, according to the Retail, Wholesale and Department Store Union. And they say there were 23 objections, OK? And one of the main reasons for the objection was that Amazon got the United States Postal Service to install a mailbox right outside the front door in full view of security cameras. And the union says, look, many of our members simply felt intimidated because they felt they were being watched as they voted. So now the Labour Relations Board is asking Amazon to redo it. This is a national story because Joe Biden is the most union president that we have had in many, many years. I think you have to go back to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, before you get one quite as pro-union as this one is. He talks about unions all the time. And now Amazon is facing another threat, as they would see it, to create a union in Staten Island, which is one of the 5 New York boroughs. And there they want to create a union as well for the same reason. So it's a very, very interesting story, that. And I think Amazon thought they'd put it to bed. You know, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars campaigning against the need for a union, and it clearly won't lie down.
John, if only we had time to go back to President Roosevelt. I know you were reporting on American affairs then, but sadly we have to move on. Good to see you. See you tomorrow, as they say.
I was. I knew him personally, of course, yes. He liked my shorthand.
Maybe at least he could read it. You couldn't.
John Terrace, New York, thank you very much.
I'll see you later.
Well, Britain's competition regulator has told Facebook's parent company Meta to sell the animated images platform Giphy. The UK Competition and Markets Authority said Meta's acquisition of Giphy gave it an unfair advantage over other social media platforms and could be harmful to UK advertisers. Meta says it will consider appealing the decision.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Barbados parts ways with Britain and Queen Elizabeth to become the world's newest republic.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
Safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots.
France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year.
France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Makes the Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliet Mann. Our top stories. Pressure grows on the European Central Bank as Eurozone inflation hits a record high.
Global markets are rattled after Moderna predicts vaccines will be less effective against the new Omicron COVID variant.
And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he wants all eligible people to have their COVID booster jabs by the end of January, and that the army will help.
The target that we've set ourselves is to offer a booster to everyone eligible by the end of January. And as with the first jabs, we'll be working through people by age group, and we'll deploy at least 400 military personnel to assist the efforts of our NHS, alongside, of course, the fantastic Jabs Army of volunteers.
Easyjet has reported $1.5 billion losses, warning of more turbulence in the months ahead. Easyjet's share price is indicative of industry-wide losses, but CEO Johan Lundgren played down the results.
The year that we reported on is the first year where we had the full impact of the pandemic, both in the winter season and, of course, in the summer season. But once again, we came into this in a stronger position than most, and in many cases we have also transformed the airline throughout this period as well in terms of reallocating capacity into those routes that are most in demand. We have reduced costs, we have digitalized the company to make it easier for customers, and we also have leading policies when it comes to flexibility for people to make changes to the booking, as an example. So there's a lot of things also that coming out of this will mean that we will be stronger.
Well, Andrew Charlton is an aviation analyst. Now, Andrew, we're going to talk about the whole industry, but let's start with Easyjet. I mean, the short-term challenge is Omicron, but the longer-term outlook, is that more optimistic?
Gosh. A week ago, I would have said yes to that. A week ago, I think there was a feeling that perhaps the industry was recovering. Omicron has thrown a spanner into those works, of course. I think two things to say. First, the airlines that have survived, as Johan just said in that interview, the ones that have survived well, such as Easyjet and Ryanair and Wizz and what have you, have done so with liquidity, with flexibility, and with a lot of restructuring already. So I think they can optimistically hope that they can get through this next wave, whatever it is. As for the industry generally, it's a little bit harder. Unfortunately, a number of airlines got a lot of state aid and didn't necessarily do the restructuring that perhaps they should have, because some of that restructuring was going to be quite nasty.
Yes, many airlines tapped investors for billions, didn't they? Look, this turbulence is
not just
sector-wide.
investors, unfortunately, Juliet, not just investors, of course. They put their hand out to taxpayers. And if it had been investors, I'd have been happy. The taxpayers, maybe less so.
Understood. Well, look, this turbulence, as you say, is sector-wide. Shares in BA's parent company, IAG, sunk almost 20% since this new variant was identified last week. And Virgin Atlantic now looks like they're in for a bit of a bleak winter.
Well, I think a lot of airlines like Virgin, of course, have a sort of counter-cyclical market because a lot of their business is flying Britons to the Caribbean. And when something like this happens, I think that everybody gets nervous. A lot of people are cancelling their flights for fear either that something will happen later, so they may as well cancel now, or for fear of being caught there. Now, personally, I'd quite like to be stuck in the Caribbean. It sounds like fun. But if you've got to get back to work, if you've got to do things, then that uncertainty impacts the buyers' minds and starts to see cancellations of bookings. That has an immediate impact on revenue, on cash flow, but also on confidence going forward.
But in terms of Virgin as well, they're perhaps one of those airlines that haven't done the cost-cutting as aggressively as they might have done, that haven't secured the funding that they might have done?
They worked very hard to secure funding, but it's certainly true that the British government was much more parsimonious, really. It refused to assist the airlines. It said, you're on your own, which, let me say, I applaud. That is exactly the correct attitude. And if you look at that compared to, say, for example, Italy or France, where state money was given, if Virgin survive, and they are a good airline with great reputation, and they have got some liquidity issues now, but if they're able to go back to the well and do that again, I think they will be much stronger for it when they finally get out the other side of this terrible pandemic.
I suppose the only certainty in aviation right now is that when the pandemic is in the tailwinds, it won't look the same as it did at the start of it. I mean, can we expect more action from challengers like Wizz Air?
Oh, I think certainly. I think certainly, to speak for Europe for a moment, the three strongest survivors, if that's the right word, the airlines that have come through the pandemic best are the three low-cost carriers, Wizz, Easyjet and Ryanair, and Wizz and Ryanair more so perhaps than Easyjet. So I think that's going to have an enormous impact on the landscape for European aviation. The longer-haul international stuff is going to be much slower to recover because of the sort of nation-by-nation wall building or, door closing that we're seeing. And for a lot of airlines like BA, Lufthansa, a lot of their business comes from that sort of long-haul international stuff. I hope, unfortunately, Juliet, I think there'll be less change than I think there should be, but I'm sure that there will be some change. There'll be some consolidation, and I hope there'll be a lot of rationalisation as well. The other thing that we're definitely going to see, and I hate to come over all aeroplane geeky here, but we've retired most of the big aeroplanes, 747s, A380s, things like that. So there will be more flights, I think, on smaller aircraft, which incidentally have got a better emission record as well. So that's all good news.
But fewer people can get on those planes, of course. Andrew Charlton, I hope you make it on one of them to the Caribbean.
So do I.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks very much.
The Omicron variant of COVID has dealt a blow to the cruise ship industry. Cape Town in South Africa has welcomed its first passenger ship since March 2020. It was meant to be a big celebration marking the start of the cruise ship season. But now the vessel is likely to be rerouted following rule changes by many countries about arrivals coming from southern Africa.
Now, Chinese and African leaders are meeting in the Senegalese capital, Dakar, for the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Now, in its 21st year, FOCAC has become one of the most important platforms for deepening ties between African countries and China. Infrastructure, trade and health cooperation have topped the agenda, with China promising further vaccine donations and more imports from Africa.
Well, China's been Africa's biggest trading partner for 11 years now. In the first 10 months of this year alone, that trade was worth more than $200 billion. CGTN's Huang Fei reports from China's southern province of Guangdong.
A fresh brew from Cameroon. These coffee beans were grown at high altitudes in volcanic soil in Central Africa. Daniel Yando wants to bring a unique blend of local flavors to China.
Now, the new generation of Chinese people, they want to know about coffee. I think it's a good market. That's why I decided to open my company in China, particularly in Nansha, because Nansha is the free trade zone.
The Nansha Free Trade Zone offers companies lower import taxes and quick access to one of the busiest ports in the world. Policies like this are part of the reason trade between Guangdong and Africa is 14 times higher than it was 15 years ago. Electronics and agricultural products make up the bulk of that trade, but there is huge untapped potential in the fashion industry as well.
This factory produces 3 million pieces of female apparel every year, selling mostly to Europe and America. And now the factory is looking to Africa as their next big consumer market, where the local fashion industry is estimated to be worth more than $30 billion.
I'm really keen to enter the African market. There is immense potential in Nigeria in particular. It has over 200 million people. That's 16% of the entire African population. It's a sea of opportunities.
Yes, I think so. This style, they like it.
Nigerian businessman Maxi sees strong demand in Africa's largest economy for products from Guangdong, especially leading up to year-end holidays. Today, he's visiting this factory for the first time, hoping to establish a new supplier for fashion retailers back home. But he thinks transactions are still too slow and complex.
Sometimes difficult to transfer money from Africa to China. I hope China can establish more of the banks in Africa, and the transfer of yuan, We don't need to do business with the foreign currency. I hope they can see what they can do to improve so that the businessman doesn't need to carry the bulk, of money when he's traveling.
Daniel also thinks progress will come from educating both sides about their different cultures and protocols. He hopes mutual understanding, like these roasted beans, will energize and stimulate future trade between China and Africa. Huang Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
The Philippines is in the middle of an ambitious drive to vaccinate 9 million people over 3 days. Government troops and tens of thousands of volunteers have been deployed. 2.4 million doses were given on the first day. The campaign was scaled back from an earlier target of 15 million shots, but would still be a record in a country with one of the worst outbreaks in Asia, where vaccine hesitancy remains high.
Storms in Turkey have left 4 people dead and at least 19 injured. 2 of the victims are thought to have died when a roof collapsed in Istanbul. Winds of up to 130 kilometres an hour also destroyed a clock tower in the city. Ferry services across the Bosphorus have been suspended, with warnings of more bad weather to come.
French police have cleared a camp near Dunkirk, thought to have been the former home of 27 migrants who drowned in the English Channel last week. Hundreds of mostly Iranian and Iraqi nationals, including women and children, had been staying in the camp at Grand Saint. French authorities say they'll be taken to processing centres and given the opportunity to apply for asylum.
In Georgia, thousands of supporters of a jailed former leader have held protests outside the courthouse where he's facing trial. Mikhail Saakashvili, who's been on a hunger strike, is facing charges of abuse of office while president in 2007. He was arrested after returning home from Ukraine last month to support the opposition ahead of key elections.
A new vent has opened up on the volcano that's brought chaos to the Canary island of La Palma. Fresh flows of lava have engulfed more homes on the island as eruptions enter their 10th week. La Palma's airport reopened at the weekend after a clean-up operation to remove debris and volcanic ash from the runway. But volcanologists warned that the volcano remains unstable.
Barbados has just become the world's newest republic after removing the UK monarch as head of state. Prime Minister Mia Mottley's been leading a ceremony to mark the change, along with famous Bajans like pop star Rihanna and cricketer Garfield Sobers.
Charlotte Parsons has been looking back on an historic day.
After nearly 4 centuries of British rule, this was the moment the Caribbean island of Barbados became a republic. As the nation's flag was raised in the capital city of Bridgetown, it marked an end to the UK monarchy's role as head of state. Queen Elizabeth's son and heir, Prince Charles, attended the event and spoke openly about his country's participation in the slave trade that had dominated large parts of Barbados' history.
From the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history, the people of this island forged their path with extraordinary fortitude. Emancipation, self-government, and independence were your waypoints. Freedom, justice, and self-determination have been your guides.
COVID-19 protocols meant that many were forced to watch the ceremony via the internet to see Governor-General Sandra Mason sworn in as the island's first president, 20 years after a government commission had recommended the break with Buckingham Palace.
Possessing a clear sense of who we are and what we are capable of achieving, in the year 2021, we now turn our vessel's bow towards the new republic. We do this so that we may seize the full substance of our sovereignty.
It was a star-studded event, with pop superstar Rihanna being made an official ambassador of her home country. Her popularity will be harnessed to try and reinvigorate a tourism industry that drew 1 million visitors a year before the pandemic.
Ambassador Robin Rihanna Fenty, may you continue to shine like a diamond and bring honor to your nation by your words, by your actions, and to do credit wherever you shall go.
Barbados is the first country since Mauritius to renounce the crown, and questions have been raised as to whether this will spark a new wave of republicanism in other nations, such as Jamaica, where the 2 main political parties support breaking away from the British monarchy. Charlotte Parsons, CGTN Europe.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, let it snow. How the Winter Olympics is fueling a flurry of interest in skiing equipment in China.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for the Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Now, on a good day, you might feel you're walking on sunshine. How about walking on a solar pavement which turns that sunshine into electricity?
It's one of the innovations at Planet Budapest, Central Europe's showcase of eco-innovation. Linda Kennedy reports.
Planet Budapest, home to the latest technology and gadgets from Central Europe. The expo features mostly Hungarian, Czech, Polish and Slovak companies which have developed products to save energy, reduce waste and improve air quality. Like this solar sidewalk. 25 square metres of this electric avenue can power a family home. It's just like solar panels on a roof, with one important difference.
We had to make it tough. It has a 10 millimeter tempered glass surface, which makes it possible for cars to ride on. We don't want to build open roads. We don't want to build highways out of this. But if you have a family house with a garage, you have a driveway. You can put it on your driveway easily, and it will be no problem if you drive on with your car.
The expo covers 20,000 square metres and has 180 exhibitors.
At the expo, there is an innovation on every stand, like this reverse vending machine. I didn't drink this, but this is for demonstration purposes. It goes in like that. Over here, you press the button with the money mentioned, and then you get a ticket, which you can take to the supermarket checkout and get money back. What's interesting about this is that the company behind it does the machine, it does the compression of the bottles and the cans that goes in it, and all the logistics are done by electric vehicles.
This irrigation bag prolongs the life of large trees, which store carbon in their trunks and leaves. Trees shouldn't be watered at the base, the Czech bag developer says, but several metres away to ensure outermost roots are kept strong. Their message to maximise tree carbon storage: preserve more, plant less.
To replace one large oak, we have to plant something about 3,000 trees of size which are normally planted in the cities. So extreme number of trees which we don't have space.
When it comes to patents filed for green tech and innovation, the countries that dominate are China, Japan, the US, Germany and South Korea. This expo marks Central Europe's ambition to join that list and have some fun on the way. Linda Kennedy, CGTN, Budapest.
Italy has launched a new international branding campaign in a bid to raise awareness and boost exports. It's aimed at key markets across the world, notably China. Our correspondent Hermione Kitson reports now from Rome.
In a campaign the government describes as unprecedented and ambitious, Italy is calling on the international community to be immersed in its national identity.
We're builders, innovators, artists and scientists.
The campaign starts from these 6 words: creativity, passion, heritage, innovation, style and diversity.
The initial stage of the mainly digital campaign will be to communicate a storyline through these key themes, which will be adapted for different audiences worldwide.
Italy is simply extraordinary. Be it.
So it's a content-based, let's say, informative narrative campaign that will be leading to millions in the very high expectation, billions of people interacting with the Italian narrative and discovering the Italian values.
The second aim will be to promote the Made in Italy production chains.
The campaign aims to relaunch the sectors of the economy hardest hit by the pandemic by targeting Italy's key export markets in 26 countries across Europe, Asia and the US.
China is high on the agenda, with efforts underway to build on the Belt and Road Initiative and the exchange of heritage products via the EU's Geographical Indication Agreement.
So we expect China will be one of the countries where the exchange will grow more, and is one of the countries where we want to be present more with this campaign.
This year, Italy's exports not only returned to pre-pandemic levels, but reached a record high of €377 billion.
Explains also why this is the right moment to present our campaign.
A moment of economic and cultural rejuvenation for the so-called beautiful country, its people and its products. The campaign will run until August 2022. Hermione Gibson, CGTN, Rome.
Winter sports are becoming more popular in China as the country builds up to the Winter Olympics, and that has led to a boom for ski and snowboard gear. Sao Bing reports.
Many world-renowned ski brands like Salomon, Fischer and Hossenil are made at factories like this one, the Composite Tech. One of China's biggest ski and snowboard makers, the company staff have seen firsthand how far winter sports has gone in China, especially since Beijing's successful bid for the 2022 Winter Olympics.
30 years ago, it was no ski at all, nothing available. 10 years ago, then you see some ski resorts coming. And for the past 5-6 years, they are real ski resorts. And of course, an Olympic game is big. It's a big event.
The vice president adds some of most recognized brands started their offices in China, proving the potential of the Chinese market.
Yeah, Rossignol and the Salomon. I mean, they are big players. I mean, they are major companies that they are worldwide leaders. If they are investing in China, if they are doing a special setup for China, that means they know China market is growing.
Data shows total visit to ski facilities in China has grown nearly fourfold since 2006. In the lead up to the Winter Olympic Games in 2022, these trends are likely to intensify. Growing interest in winter sports in China has prompted companies to make changes.
After years of making skis for world-renowned brands, Composite Tech decided to build its own brand. These are all its self-produced products. Look, this one is a snowboard for small kids.
Focusing on the market for young consumers, French brand Hossenil is also changing things up.
We have revamped our logo to make it look more energetic and fashionable. We are also making our products with a more casual style because our company finds that enthusiasm for skiing among Chinese people has risen due to the 2022 Winter Olympics. Such changes will allow more people to get involved.
The Winter Olympics has not only brought a breath of fresh air to Chinese people's interest in winter sports, but also growing opportunities for sports gear manufacturers. Cao Bing, CGTN, Dongguan in Guangdong Province.
The headlines again. Pressure grows on the European Central Bank as Eurozone inflation hits a record high.
Global markets are rattled after Moderna predicts vaccines will be less effective against the new Omicron COVID variant.
Easyjet reports a $1.5 billion loss, with airline bosses warning of more turbulence in the months ahead.
And while we've been on air, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he wants all eligible people to have their COVID booster jabs by the end of January, and that the army will help. He added that another lockdown is unlikely, but nothing has been ruled out.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Preview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.